For some reason, we were brought in to the building via the wudu facilities. That was one of the first encounters that I had with Muslims in Indonesia, and it was a very strange encounter because I didn't know what they were doing. They were all bathing and getting ready for prayers, and I had no idea what was going on. It was really weird, yeah, because nobody sort of bothered to explain anything, so it was just sort of a very weird experience.
Assalamualaikum. We are in another episode of Muslim Reverts Diary, and today we are going to meet Brother Imran Price in Brisbane, Australia.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum. My name is Imran Price. I'm Australian. I was born in Brisbane 61 years ago, but I lived overseas for more than 20 years. So a long time ago I got into the banking industry and started working with a Japanese bank that transferred me from Sydney to London and then to Singapore in 1995. My first encounter with Muslims was mainly in Singapore. I'd met a few in Sydney, but didn't really have much to do with them. I had one client that I found out later was a Muslim, but I didn't know at the time that he was a Muslim. One of my very first encounters was when I went on a business trip to Jakarta to visit one of the state banks in Jakarta. And I don't know why, but we happened to have a meeting there on a Friday, and for some reason we were brought in to the building via the wudu facilities. That was one of the first encounters that I had with Muslims in Indonesia, and it was a very strange encounter because I didn't know what they were doing. They were all bathing and getting ready for prayers, and I had no idea what was going on. It was really weird, yeah, because nobody sort of bothered to explain anything, so it was just sort of a very weird experience. And then in 1996 I met this young lady who's Singaporean, and I had to ask her about her race and religion because it wasn't obvious to me what they were. She was the one that introduced me to an organisation in Singapore called the Muslim Converts Association of Singapore. And at the time I started attending classes there to learn about her religion, her culture, because I knew almost nothing about it. As I got to know her better and introduced her to my family, and I decided, after doing a lot of research and a lot of reading, to embrace Islam in 1997 at the Converts Association. And then we got married later in 1997. And our first daughter was born in 1998, so she had her 21st birthday yesterday. And our son was born in 2000. I got involved with the Converts Association after a few years and eventually became deputy president of the association. We live very close to the association actually, so it was sort of very much part of our lives, spending a lot of time around there in Galang in Singapore. And then in 2010 we decided to move to Malaysia. So we moved up to Malaysia in December 2010 and lived there for nearly 4 years. So I used to be in the banking industry, and then after the Asian financial crisis got kicked out by the bank, retrenched, actually when my wife was 9 months pregnant. And so I got involved in the recruitment business and set up a small recruitment company in Malaysia. So I had a chance of running my own business for a few years while I was living in Malaysia. And then unfortunately my mum passed away and my dad was living on his own, so we decided to come back to Brisbane in 2014. My sister was living in Brisbane, but my other sister was in Sydney, and so Dad was then in his 80s and not in good health. So we came back, and he passed away last year at the age of 87. And then eventually I did a diploma in Islamic Studies because the association had a diploma course that they were running in conjunction with the International Islamic University of Malaysia. So we used to fly the professors down and have like a 2-day intensive once a month, spread out over a year. family, were actually very understanding. Initially, of course, they were a little bit concerned, but once they had met my wife and they realised she was a lovely person and she is the wonderful person that she is, so they appreciated that. So that made things much easier. I think that's a difficult question. I think all of us need to do a better job of presenting, the real face of Islam to the world, because it's the most misunderstood religion. Unfortunately, the extremists and the terrorists are the ones that get all the media and the attention, which is understandable because that's what sells newspapers. That's given the majority of the world's population an incredibly distorted, incorrect view of Islam. So we all need to do a much better job of educating people about the real Islam. I've had a few encounters where people haven't wanted to return my salam because they weren't sure whether I was a Muslim, because I didn't look like a Muslim, I guess. Even I remember when I went to the National Mosque in Malaysia, the lady at the counter, she didn't return my salam, which I thought was strange. We've started a small convert support group here in Brisbane at Currabee Mosque to try and help people that are new to Islam. We're trying to do whatever we can. It's a group of converts that are trying to help people that are on the path. Each of them come from completely different backgrounds. Many of them are quite young, they're much younger than me. I met a young lady yesterday who's only 20 years of age and just decided to embrace Islam, and would like to meet more Muslims, because now that she's a Muslim, she'd like to meet some more Muslims. My advice is always to people is that they should take things one step at a time, not sort of jump in and try and do everything perfectly from day one. There's a lot to take on, and there's a lot to learn. And at the moment it's very confusing for the new Muslims, because there's just so much out there on the internet, and it's hard for them to know what are reliable sources of information. So we try to provide reliable sources of information with the imams here in Brisbane, and we run a class every so often. It's not like in Singapore where they can have a class every day. We have a small class once or twice a year for the new Muslims. And then we have a prayer workshop, something during Ramadan, iftar, to break fast together, and we have the great Australian tradition of barbecues, so we have 1 or 2 barbecues a year.